Hello everybody. This video, as frequent viewers will immediately notice, is not the usual Mechabellum gaming on my channel, but it is something I've wanted to do for a while and I finally came around to actually do it. Right out of the gate, I want to make clear what I am talking about and what I'm not talking about. This video series is about how a normal user with a similar use case to mine can switch to OpenSUSE Leap or Tumbleweed with KDE Plasma as their desktop, experiencing as few problems as possible. This is a more practical guide, not only focused on the installation, but also on the general how can I fit this in my life without ruining my life by having to spend several hours a day fixing Linux issues or something along the line. It is supposed to be more for the general user and not so much for the general content creator. Also, the series will be split into several videos, the first one not even touching the installation and instead focusing mostly on the why switch at all. And yeah, we will see where we go from there because I don't even know myself. I just wrote a lot of the script. To start off, I want to explain my personal story and where I'm coming from because this is maybe close to what other people are experiencing. And if your use case is the same, and to that you need to know my use case, this video will hopefully help you a lot. So, until a few years ago, I was running an aging Windows 7 installation that I was pretty unhappy with. It took around 10 to 20 minutes, if I recall it correctly, to boot up and be usable at all, which meant that every time that I had an error or power went out or something like that, it was a pain to get started again, and I just was sitting there waiting. Let's just say it was bad. This was the state until one fateful night between the 8th and 9th of January 2022, so very close to 3 years ago now, I decided to switch to Linux for real. The main issue with Windows 7, as mentioned, is that it is end of life. That is to say, it has no longer received security updates for a whole 2 years of me using it. So I've been running without any security updates on Windows 7 for 2 years. I didn't encounter any noticeable viruses, but who knows what happened under the hood, let's be honest. The computer was slow and sluggish, and I'd definitely say that my many years of bad management, the usual bloat from Microsoft and myself, and all the stuff that you're doing when you're growing up with a computer but have no actual plan, that just slows the whole system down. And I also had a lot of hard drives in there, and yeah, I had multiple giant zip files containing every bit of data that I held precious, and I would just copy that to the other hard drive in case the main hard drive fails. But I never updated these and instead made more of these copies until I filled up 2 terabytes of data, basically, with these copies of copies without any plan, and who knows where and when the most recent version was. It was bad, let's just keep it at that. In the end, I did not want to switch to Windows 10 or 11. Now, 3 years later, I have set up my Linux machine. This is my new home, and I'm almost perfectly happy with OpenSUSE Tumbleweed on my main machine and Leap on my laptop. For a while, I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube, mostly content creators switching to Linux or at the very least giving it a shot. These are relatively one-sided, but in a different way. I'm not talking about the outcome of or the final verdict or anything like that. I'm talking about the use cases they mostly cover. Because the things they have the biggest issue with is video and image editing, also streaming in some cases, expensive hardware that I don't own, and they don't really focus that much on the usual just web browsing, gaming, and office work that many other users want to do, and they're perfectly happy if they can do that. Many of these content creators seem to throw themselves into the cold water of Linux, and yeah, throwing yourself into cold water is not a good experience. Nobody needs to be an expert to know that much. It is a different operating system. You can't just switch and expect everything to be the same. That would kinda, defy the very purpose of switching to something else if it was the same anyway. So I wanted to make a short video series, something like a practical user's guide on how the average Windows user can switch to this specific line of Linux distributions with the least amount of hassle and problems possible. And if you're here for that, congratulations, you're in the right place. And if you're not here for that and you want to learn how to install Hyperland on Arch Linux, just type that in the YouTube search bar. You will be in good hands with somebody else, I hope. Finally, as to what I have been doing with my computer back in the Windows 7 days, just the usual gaming and web browsing and a bit of light office work and some programming in that sense, but nothing major. It was just some AR2 modding, let's be honest. If that sounds like it's your use case as well, or these use cases cover whatever you do with your computer, then I hope you will find this very, very useful. So, why would the average Windows 10 user, and the average Windows user is a Windows 10 user, want to switch the operating system? I'd assume for the majority of people the answer would be not at all, but Microsoft is not allowing that. On the Microsoft page for end of support for Windows 10, Windows 8.1, and Windows 7, it gives you the info that, to sum it up shortly, Windows 7 has been done and dusted for years. Windows 8, let's be honest, few people ever even use that. And Windows 10 support is being cut off on October 14th, 2025. So in less than a year. If we scroll all the way down there, we can see that you can purchase extended security updates. But since there isn't even a link, they clearly don't even want you to go there. And it also costs. Here it's claiming to cost $30, and that is prohibitive. If we check out the costs for others, we can see that businesses pay more than twice that, and educational systems at least cost a lot less. Note that this is per device. So let's say you are an average user who has two computers running Windows 10 and you intend to run them until the absolute end. Be prepared to cough up about $420. Probably at the same time, when that runs out, you will have to think about switching to Windows 12 by then, I assume. Windows 11 and surely any version after that has minimum system requirements. If the computer has the following, you can run it, but to put it shortly, you need somewhat current hardware. Forget about installing this on your 10-year-old laptop. There's always some hacky ways around it, but if you want to avoid problems, that is not what you want. If you want a good running and usable experience, uh, yeah, be prepared to make a lot of weird stuff to make it work. And if you're making a lot of weird stuff anyway, might as well go to Linux. Along with that is the usual data security and privacy issues. The constant throwing AI in your face like a Half-Life headcrab. And the same goes for Windows becoming an increasingly oppressive online-only experience. Personally, I hate how Windows is becoming even more streamlined, but not in a way to make it faster and easier to use for whatever you want, but streamlined towards however Microsoft wants you to use your computer. It kind of gives off a vibe of if you try to get around it and use the system how you see fit, well, just patch that out. What are you gonna do about it? This makes Windows feel less like it's your computer and more like it's your portal to Microsoft land, where you will be bombarded with ads trying to sell you Microsoft's products until you actually do. So you tie your life to Microsoft until it's no longer a good choice to go anywhere else and purchase anything else. And in short, it's the same crap Apple has been getting rich of for years now. Personally, my main reason wasn't even that. I hated the progressive politics of Bill Gates back then and Microsoft in general today, same goes for Apple, and how they are pushing that into the system. Like, for example, if we check into the Windows power settings, then we can get informed about how good it is for the climate, that we can set all these settings to Microsoft's recommendations and reduce our CO2 production. Isn't that glorious? To put it shortly, I don't believe in the anthropomorphic climate change caused by CO2, and I specifically phrase it this way, and I could rant about this for a lot longer, but politics is not the focus on this video, so I'll end it here. All of that summed up, Windows is becoming increasingly alien, frustrating, and worrisome with each release. Apple has many of the same issues, including claiming to be eco-friendly, when all they seem to want to do is sell you more and more complete and, of course, fully priced devices. finding what, in my opinion, is only excuses to make it too hard to repair or upgrade, so you'll be coerced or even forced into e-wasting your older and perfectly fine devices. And Microsoft is doing the same. They also have the AI because everyone has it. And if you're a tech company in 2024 and 2025, if you don't have AI in your lineup, your stock market line doesn't go up as much. So, what magic did I use to switch from Windows to Linux and avoid a lot of the troubles that will inevitably happen, such as being stuck with an unusable or broken system when you really need to use it? Introducing the Crap Top. This magnificent Acer Aspire 1, 521, I think. I hope I figured that out correctly, judging by the pictures of the peripheral ports and that sort of stuff. Weirdly enough, it has 2 gigabytes of RAM. It was bought secondhand, okay? It has served me for years and is in use the majority of days, even now. It clocks in at an amazing 175 single core score and 177 multi-core score with Geekbench 6.3.0 64-bit Linux with its massive AMD Athlon 2 Neo K125 single core single thread 1.7 GHz CPU. For comparison, this is about 8.1% single core score of my main machine and almost 2.7% of its multi-core score. And that's not even accounting for the lack of a GPU. Forget ever installing even the most deep-loaded and hacked Windows 11 on that thing. I think you'd have a terrible time if it even starts once. But believe it or not, this thing is running OpenSUSE Leap 15.5 with recent security updates, and if I can use it for my news and music wherever I please, I'm going to, which is mostly in a drawer next to my left hand, next to my regular computer. The keyboard has a number of inoperable keys, but in the same drawer there's a USB keyboard and a mouse, so that problem solved. I'm not going to lie, this thing is slow, but it works, even web browsing at a snail's pace. And by installing Linux on this device first and using it for a while for the few use cases that I wanted to, I could experiment and break things with basically no consequences. If I broke it, oh well, just reinstall. But with OpenSUSE, that's not even much of a worry. I hope I'm recounting most of that correctly from memory. There was a point. Initially, I was only dual booting it, and I gave Linux only 35 gigabytes of disk space. At some point, while in the middle of updates, disk space just ran out. The updates couldn't complete. So in my panic, I tried to reboot, but I was stuck in the login screen and the desktop environment wouldn't load. I could only use the dreaded command line. Yeah. I deleted some temporary files and tried to resume the update, but it failed again. Not enough disk space once again. I had only made a little bit of progress. So after rebooting again and deleting some files or moving them to the Windows partition or whatever, I could finally complete the update. And I just rebooted and it worked. And even if it had failed, Snapper would have had my back. Snapper, which is installed right out of the box, creates automated snapshots, and that has saved my main system more times than I care to count. This is why I personally recommend OpenSUSE as a beginner distro. There may be better distributions, but I haven't tested them because I never had to, so I didn't care to test them. It is simply that this system is surprisingly hard to break. Even if you screw the pooch royally, there's a good chance you can just recover the system, load a previous snapshot, and the process to do that is very simple and can be done within a few minutes if you include the time it takes to launch the system. So, as far as I'm concerned and convinced, this is a good system for beginners. And I don't want to get much further into this. We will be talking more about distributions and that other sort of stuff that people get bombarded when they first try to switch to Linux in the next video. Thanks for watching and listening, and until then. So, what time is it? Oh, past 3 a.m. Well, this took a lot longer. It's a lot of effort. I hope people appreciate it.